Her heel was still damp from the rain when it pressed against my cheek, not forcefully, but like it had always known its place. She didn't say a word, just watched me, studying my breath, as if testing how far she could go without a command. Something in me shifted, surrendered. Welcome to Goddess Foot Confessions. Let's uncover what really happened. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It whispered against the windows, steady and slow, like a reminder that the world outside was still spinning, even if mine had stalled completely. I was crashing on her couch, not because I had no other options, but because this one felt the furthest from where I had been. My ex had left in the most cliché way possible. A note, a suitcase missing, and a silence that hummed louder than any goodbye. I didn't want to talk about it, and luckily, she didn't ask. Her name was Lila. She was my friend's older sister, calm, poised, with a kind of energy that never rushed. She lived in this tastefully minimal apartment with old wooden floors that creaked when you moved too quickly and plants that thrived in places I wouldn't think to water. I thought she'd feel sorry for me. She didn't. Instead, she offered the couch with a throw pillow, a blanket, and a quiet nod that somehow said more than words could have. That first night, I slept like I hadn't in weeks. The living room was warm, dimly lit by a floor lamp that gave off a golden glow. I could hear her footsteps in the hallway. Light, rhythmic, then the sound of a cabinet closing. The rain outside picked up again. I turned toward the back cushions, trying to disappear into them, but something about the space, the air, her presence, the way the silence held, made it impossible to shut off my mind. She walked by barefoot. I remember that clearly. The quiet pad of her feet against the wood, the hem of her long gray sweater brushing her thighs. It wasn't meant to be noticed, but I did. The arch of her foot as she stepped. The way her heel touched down like she was made of confidence and quiet. I told myself I was just tired. That it was just a long day and an awkward place to sleep. But something had shifted. Not out loud. Not even in her. Just in me. The morning light in her apartment was soft, almost sleepy, like it wasn't fully ready to start the day. I wasn't either. I sat hunched at the edge of the couch, half wrapped in the blanket, staring into the steam rising from my coffee cup. The rain had slowed, but left behind a grayness that pressed gently on the windows. Then I heard her, the shuffle of her footsteps on the wooden floor. Slow, unhurried, no music, no words. Just the sound of her moving through the apartment, like it was part of her. She was barefoot again. I turned my head slightly, pretending to look at the coffee table, but my eyes found her. She moved through the kitchen with a grace that didn't seem intentional. It was just the way she existed. Loose pajama pants, a faded black tank top, and her long hair tied up messily. But it was her feet I noticed again. There was something about the way her toes curled lightly against the cool wood as she reached for a mug. The way her arch lifted when she rose onto her tiptoes to grab the coffee from the top shelf. The soft press of her heel as she came back down. Slow, steady, sure. I didn't know why I was so aware of it. I told myself it was just something to focus on, a neutral, harmless detail. But it wasn't neutral, and it didn't feel harmless. She caught me watching. Not directly, just one of those fleeting glances. Her eyes met mine for a second, unreadable. Then she smiled gently, like maybe she knew, or maybe she didn't. "You sleep okay?" she asked, filling her mug. I nodded. Yes, surprisingly. She took a sip, then leaned against the counter, one foot resting lightly on top of the other. "You can stay as long as you need," she said, voice low, calm. No pressure. And just like that, the conversation ended. But her feet stayed bare, and I kept watching. It was around 9:30 when she asked if I wanted to watch something. Her voice came from the hallway, casual, like she already knew I'd say yes. I did. I needed something to quiet the noise in my head. She brought a blanket and dropped it in the space between us on the couch, then curled up at the far end. I stayed on my side, careful not to seem too comfortable, too familiar. The movie started. Something old, black and white, where the characters said a lot by saying nothing. The rain had returned, softer now, a rhythmic tapping that matched the slow pacing of the film. At some point, she shifted. Her legs stretched out slowly across the couch. The blanket slid a bit. I didn't move. I didn't have to. Her foot found my leg without warning. It wasn't purposeful. Not at first. Just the faintest graze of her toes against the side of my knee. But I felt it like a spark. The weight of it was light, almost nothing, but everything in me reacted. My breath caught. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. The moment passed in silence. Her eyes stayed on the screen, expression calm, unreadable. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe it wasn't. I stayed still, unsure if I should shift away or pretend I hadn't noticed. But the touch lingered, soft, steady. Not demanding, just there. She adjusted slightly, and her heel pressed gently against my thigh this time. My muscles tensed involuntarily. I felt exposed, not physically, but emotionally, like she had found some part of me I hadn't meant to reveal. Still, she said nothing. Eventually, she pulled her legs back under the blanket. The contact ended as quietly as it had begun, but the sensation remained, like a ghost across my skin. We finished the movie in silence. She yawned, stretched, then rose without looking at me. "Night," she said softly. "Night." I stayed on the couch long after she left, and I didn't move my leg. The rain outside had picked up again, hammering against the windows like a steady drumbeat. Thunder rolled low, distant but insistent, as if the storm wanted to remind us it wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. Inside, the apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the old wooden floor. I found myself curled into the corner of the couch, wrapped in the same blanket she'd tossed between us the night before. The air felt heavy, charged, but not uncomfortable. There was an intimacy in the silence, a shared stillness that seemed to pull us closer without words. She sat across from me in an armchair, bare feet tucked beneath her, fingers wrapped around a steaming mug. The soft light cast shadows across her face, outlining the curve of her cheek and the gentle tilt of her lips as she glanced my way. Our eyes met for just a moment, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. I could feel the weight of her gaze, calm, steady, and somehow knowing. Without looking away, she shifted slightly, and I caught the bare arch of her foot, poised lightly on the edge of the rug. The sight settled deep inside me. It wasn't just the foot itself, though the slender toes, the smooth skin, and the delicate way she held herself spoke volumes. It was the quiet confidence she wore like a second skin. The way her foot seemed to belong exactly where it was, and yet held a power over me I wasn't prepared to resist. I swallowed hard, heart ticking faster than the rain. My hands twitched restlessly in my lap, craving the touch I dared not ask for. For a long moment, we simply sat there, two people caught in the same storm, sharing a silence thick with meaning. Eventually, she set her mug down and stood, stretching like a cat. Her feet pressed softly into the floor, and she glanced back at me over her shoulder. "Try to get some rest," she said quietly, voice gentle. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I would. She walked away barefoot, and I watched every step, feeling something inside me shift again, subtle but undeniable. The next morning, the sunlight slipped in soft and pale through the blinds, dust motes dancing in the quiet air. I was still tangled in the remnants of restless sleep, tracing idle patterns on the blanket as I tried to anchor myself to the moment. Then I saw her, sitting at the small dining table, one leg crossed over the other, barefoot, her fingers expertly painting a fresh coat of red polish onto her toenails. The color caught the light, vibrant, bold, and somehow perfectly out of place in the gentle morning calm. Her foot flexed slightly, toes spreading as she carefully coated each nail. The arch was pronounced, the skin smooth and flawless. I caught my breath. It was a simple, silent display, but it held a kind of unspoken invitation, a quiet assertion of control and grace. She looked up, catching me watching. A small smile curved her lips, teasing but unreadable. No words came, just that glance that felt like a secret share between us. I tried to focus on the paintbrush, the slow, deliberate strokes, but my eyes kept drifting back to the subtle play of muscles beneath her skin, the way her foot rested lightly against the chair's leg, almost as if it belonged there, and perhaps, by extension, here in this space with me. The silence stretched, filled with the soft scratch of brush on nail and the steady pulse of my racing heart. I felt both exposed and protected, vulnerable and drawn in by the quiet magnetism of that moment. When she finally finished, she pressed her toes together, then wiggled them free, sending a shiver through me that I could neither explain nor resist. "Red suits you," I found myself saying, voice rough. Her smile deepened, eyes glinting. "Maybe you'll get to see more of it." The promise lingered in the air, a tension that simmered just beneath the surface, waiting for the next move. Evenings in her apartment became a kind of quiet ritual, a delicate rhythm I wasn't quite part of, but desperately wanted to be. One night, as the rain softened to a gentle drizzle, she unfolded her yoga mat in the living room and began her stretches. She was barefoot, of course, long legs extended slowly, toes splaying like they were searching for something in the soft carpet beneath them. Her movements were fluid and effortless, as if her body was speaking a language I'd never learned but yearned to understand. I watched her arch and curl her feet, the way her toes flexed against the floor, gripping, then releasing in perfect balance. The soft light caught the curve of her heel, smooth and pale against the faded rug. Every stretch seemed deliberate, a slow unfolding, both graceful and intimate. It wasn't just exercise. It was a kind of quiet meditation, a moment where she was completely herself. I stayed rooted on the couch, mesmerized by the subtle play of muscles beneath her skin and the silent power in her bare feet. They moved like whispers, light, confident, and unyielding. At one point, she caught me watching, and instead of pulling away, her gaze softened. She smiled, a slow, knowing smile, as if to say that maybe I was closer than I thought. I swallowed, feeling warmth rise through me, a mixture of longing and reverence that I couldn't name. It was a hunger for connection, a desire to touch that quiet strength. She finished her routine and padded barefoot over to the kitchen, leaving the air charged with a kind of promise. I didn't move. I just kept watching. The next evening, the atmosphere between us had shifted, lighter, charged with an unspoken tension. She appeared in the doorway, barefoot as usual, a small, playful smile on her lips. "I could use a hand," she said softly, holding up one foot with a delicate arch. "Would you help me with this?" My heart skipped. The simple request sent a ripple through me, awakening something I'd been trying to contain. She extended her foot toward me, toes flexing slightly, the soft skin glowing under the room's warm light. I hesitated for only a moment before reaching out, fingers trembling. The first touch was tentative, fingertips brushing her heel, tracing the curve where softness met strength. She closed her eyes, a faint sigh escaping her lips. Her foot rested easily in my hands, as if it belonged there, a weight both grounding and freeing. I could feel the subtle pulse beneath her skin, the delicate tension in the arch, and the gentle wiggle of her toes that made my breath hitch. She shifted slightly, giving me better access, and I began to knead the sole carefully. Every motion was slow, reverent, as if I was learning a language spoken through touch. Her skin was warm, smooth, and alive beneath my palms. She opened her eyes, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. The silence between us grew thicker, charged with anticipation, vulnerability, and a promise neither of us dared to voice. Minutes passed like that, the world outside fading into irrelevance. I focused entirely on her foot, on the quiet connection growing between us, on the way her presence filled the room without a word. When I finally paused, she smiled, genuine and soft, and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't just gratitude. It was acknowledgement, and I felt honored. My hand still tingled from the memory of her foot resting lightly in my palms, warm and alive. I hadn't expected how fragile the moment would feel, like holding something precious and unfamiliar, something I was both drawn to and afraid to fully claim. That night, as I lay on the couch, the faint scent of her skin lingered in the air. I could still feel the imprint of her arch against my fingertips, the gentle flex of her toes like a silent invitation. My mind replayed every second, savoring the subtle intimacy that had grown between us without words. She appeared in the kitchen in the early morning, barefoot again, sunlight catching the red polish on her nails. Her presence was effortless, but I felt my breath hitch when she walked past me, the soft pressure of her soul briefly brushing the inside of my ankle. A fleeting touch that felt deliberate. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let my eyes follow the graceful movement of her foot, the curve of her heel, the gentle spread of her toes, the way her foot rested easily on the floor as though it belonged there. Later, she asked me to come sit closer on the couch. Her bare feet found their way onto my lap, warm and inviting. My hands trembled as they reached up to touch her, not just a massage this time, but something more tentative, more searching. The first deliberate touch was a whisper against the smooth skin of her arch, a slow glide of my fingers tracing the delicate lines beneath. Her toes flexed lightly in response, and my breath caught. The silence stretched between us, thick with something unspoken and electric. She looked at me, eyes soft but piercing. I knew, in that moment, that nothing would ever be quite the same. The room felt suspended in a quiet reverence as I continued to trace the delicate curves of her foot, every fingertip memorizing the soft planes and hidden strength beneath her skin. The warmth radiated through me, subtle, intoxicating, like a secret language spoken in touches and glances rather than words. She didn't say anything. Instead, her eyes met mine with a calm intensity that held more meaning than any phrase could capture. In that silence, I felt the weight of a silent thank you, a gratitude that spoke of trust and vulnerability. Her breath deepened slightly, and the small flex of her toes beneath my hands was both invitation and reassurance. I lingered there, careful not to break the fragile moment we'd built. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This wasn't about desire alone. It was about connection, about a slow unfolding that bound us quietly but undeniably. When I finally lifted my hands, she shifted to sit up straighter, her bare foot sliding gently from my lap back to the floor. The softness of the moment remained, suspended between us like a fragile thread. She gave me a small smile, a subtle curve of her lips that held warmth and acknowledgement. "You're good at this," she said softly, voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. The role I'd stepped into, the caretaker of her calm, the bearer of her quiet strength, was new to me but somehow right. We didn't speak much after that, but the air had changed. There was an intimacy woven into the spaces between us, a promise that this was only the beginning. As she moved away, I found myself longing for the next moment, the next touch, the next silent thank you. Days slipped into a gentle rhythm, each one folding into the next like the quiet stretch of a favorite song. The couch became more than just a place to sleep. It was where I found myself drawn into the small, intimate moments that made her world feel less distant. Every evening, she would settle in after work, shedding shoes and worries alike, her bare feet soft against the hardwood floor. It became almost a ritual, her slipping out of her socks, stretching toes that seemed to speak of grace and unspoken stories. And me, I was there waiting for the subtle invitation that came in the form of a glance, a shift of weight, or the gentle press of her soul against my thigh. Massage nights became our secret. What started as a one-time favor evolved into something steady and unspoken. I'd sit cross-legged on the floor, hands ready to ease the tension out of her feet, to trace the lines of strength and softness that lived there. It wasn't just physical relief. It was a connection, a language of touch that carried more than words ever could. Her sighs of comfort, the slight arch of her foot in response, the way her toes curled around my fingers, all of it stitched us closer together. One night, as I worked slowly along the arch, she looked up with a softness in her eyes I hadn't seen before. "You're learning," she said, voice low. I smiled, knowing this was more than just a skill. It was trust, blossoming quietly between us. And beneath it all, the rain kept falling, steady, relentless, just like the slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew about myself. Morning light crept softly through the thin curtains, casting long, lazy shadows across the wooden floor. I woke to the quiet rhythm of her footsteps, barefoot, of course, padding lightly through the apartment like a whisper that hadn't quite left the night behind. She moved with that familiar grace, toes flexing just so as she reached the kitchen. I lay still, eyes half closed, but already aware of the way her bare feet connected with the cold floor, the subtle contrast of warmth and chill, the gentle press of skin to wood. She didn't notice me watching. Or maybe she did. That thought sent a flush through my cheeks I couldn't quite place. When she returned with 2 mugs of coffee, her feet were bare again, toes curling lightly as she shifted her weight from one side to the other. The red polish glimmered faintly in the soft morning light, like a secret shared just between us. I reached out, almost without thinking, and let my fingers brush the curve of her heel as she settled on the couch beside me. She didn't pull away. Instead, her foot pressed softly against my thigh, a quiet reassurance, an unspoken invitation. The connection was electric and tender all at once, a language spoken in silence, a promise that this space was ours to share. I swallowed the sudden tightness in my throat, focusing instead on the simple warmth of her skin and the way her toes flexed gently, as if testing the air between us. For a moment, time slowed. The rain outside was distant now, replaced by the soft sounds of waking life. And there, on that couch, with her bare foot resting on me, everything felt possible. The evening wrapped the apartment in its usual quiet calm, a soft cloak against the lingering chill outside. She invited me to join her on the couch again, her voice casual, but carrying an undercurrent of something deeper, a familiar invitation I no longer hesitated to accept. This time, she stretched out, slipping her legs across my lap without a word. The weight of her bare feet resting gently on me was a grounding presence, warm and reassuring, sending a subtle current that I barely dared to acknowledge. We chose a film neither of us had seen before, something light, a story told in soft colors and gentle rhythms, perfect for a night of quiet companionship. The glow of the screen flickered across her face, highlighting the delicate line of her jaw and the faint curve of a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her feet moved slowly, toes curling and flexing against my thighs, each motion a silent rhythm that set my heart racing in the smallest of ways. I resisted the urge to touch, to trace, to explore, holding back, savoring the tension as it grew between us. Every so often, her gaze would meet mine, a silent acknowledgement passing in the space between us. No words were necessary. The language of proximity and touch spoke volumes. As the movie unfolded, so did the quiet intimacy in the room, a dance of closeness and restraint, a shared secret carried in the soft pressure of her feet against me. When the credits rolled, neither of us moved immediately. The world outside could wait. Here, in this dimly lit room, time had slowed, and the connection between us deepened, wordless and profound. Late into the night, the apartment settled into a hush, the kind of quiet that invites reflection and secrets. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, head resting lightly on a pillow, chest rising and falling with slow, even breaths. I stayed awake, caught in the stillness, drawn to the gentle rise of her bare heel peeking from beneath the blanket. It was a quiet invitation, subtle and unassuming, but impossible to ignore. Her foot rested against the edge of the cushion, toes curled just slightly, soft skin glowing faintly in the muted light. I found myself tracing invisible lines in the air around it, memorizing the delicate curves and the way her muscles relaxed in sleep. There is something profoundly intimate about watching someone so vulnerable, so unguarded. The barrier between us thinned, replaced by a silent understanding that words could never capture. I wanted to reach out, to touch, but hesitated, afraid to break the fragile spell. Instead, I let my eyes linger, committing every detail to memory. The scent of her skin mingled with the faint aroma of the blanket, wrapping the room in a comforting warmth that stirred something deep inside me. In that moment, the world outside faded entirely. There was only her, the soft rhythm of her breathing, and the quiet ache of connection that stretched between us. I closed my eyes briefly, willing myself to stay present, to hold this delicate balance as long as I could. When I finally slipped away to bed, her foot was the last thing I saw, a silent promise of what was to come. The morning came slow and soft, sunlight pooling in gentle patches across the hardwood floor. I was curled on the couch, coffee warming my hands, when I caught her watching me from across the room. Her bare feet were tucked beneath her as she leaned against the doorway, eyes calm but unmistakably aware. The way she held my gaze made my heart skip, a silent question hanging between us, delicate and charged. I tried to look away, but the pull of her eyes was too strong. There was something in the quiet knowing she carried, a depth I hadn't seen before. She shifted her weight slightly, one foot sliding out, toes flexing with effortless grace. The arch caught the light, smooth, strong, and perfectly shaped. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks and glanced down at the floor, trying to keep my thoughts steady. But the memory of her foot, the way it had rested against me last night, echoed softly in my mind. A slow smile curved her lips, and she took a few steps closer, the soft pad of bare skin onward like a gentle invitation. "Caught you," she said, voice low and teasing. I swallowed, my voice barely a whisper. Maybe I'm just paying attention. Her laughter was soft but sincere, filling the space between us. She reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers lingering longer than expected. That simple touch sent a ripple through me, an electric current sparked by proximity and unspoken understanding. For a moment, we stood there, caught in the stillness of the morning, the air thick with the promise of something new and unfolding. It happened so quietly, I almost missed it, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt through me. We were sitting close on the couch, the afternoon light warm and dappled around us. She shifted slightly, her bare foot finding its way toward my face. Her toes grazed my lips, soft and deliberate, the sensation unexpected and electric. My breath hitched, caught between surprise and something deeper, a current that ran beneath the surface of everything we'd shared so far. She held my gaze, eyes steady and calm, as if daring me to respond. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken possibilities. I didn't pull away. Instead, I closed my eyes and let her toe linger just a moment longer, tracing the edge of my mouth with the gentlest pressure. The warmth of her skin contrasted with the coolness of the room, a tactile whisper that unsettled and fascinated me all at once. Her foot moved with slow intention, sliding along my jaw, the arch brushing my cheek. It was a gesture both tender and teasing, a boundary tested, an invitation extended without words. My hands trembled, wanting to reach out but unsure how far to go. The air between us buzzed with tension, charged and delicate. When she finally withdrew her foot, the room felt suddenly emptier, as if the energy she'd brought was still lingering, refusing to dissipate. I opened my eyes, meeting hers again. There was a softness there now, an understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the shift that had taken place. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the past, not the future, only the present, alive with the simple, electrifying connection of her bare foot resting on my lips. The moment her toe brushed my lips, time seemed to pause, suspended between the rush of surprise and the stillness of choice. Most would have pulled away, recoiled at the boldness of such an intimate touch. But I didn't. I stayed still, letting the soft pressure linger, the warmth of her skin against mine, the electric charge that hummed just beneath the surface. Her gaze held mine, calm and inviting, as if silently asking, "Do you want this?" I didn't answer with words. Instead, my breath slowed and my body relaxed in quiet surrender. There was no rush, no need to speak or explain. Just the simple act of acceptance, of being present in the moment, open and unguarded. She smiled softly, a smile that held promise and reassurance. Her foot traced a slow circle along my jawline, the touch both gentle and deliberate. I felt a shiver run through me, the tension melting into something warmer, deeper. The room around us faded into the background, leaving only the two of us, connected by the smallest of gestures, yet bound by something far greater. It was an unspoken agreement, a silent understanding that we were crossing a threshold together. And I didn't move away. The steady rhythm of rain began again, tapping softly against the windows like a familiar heartbeat. It filled the room with a quiet cadence, wrapping around us as the evening deepened into night. We sat side by side on the couch, close but not quite touching, the air thick with unspoken tension and anticipation. Her bare feet rested lightly on the floor, occasionally flexing, drawing my gaze despite my efforts to focus elsewhere. Outside, the world was blurred by the rain's steady fall, but inside, every detail felt sharp. The curve of her arch, the way her toes twitched ever so slightly, the softness of her skin illuminated by the muted glow of the lamp. She glanced at me, eyes shimmering with that calm confidence that had become so familiar. Slowly, she stretched out her legs, letting one foot find its way onto my lap. The warmth of her soul against my skin was a grounding force, a gentle reminder of the connection we were building, delicate, fragile, and electric. The rain's rhythm seemed to echo the quickening pulse in my chest, each drop a silent drumbeat that mirrored the slow unraveling of restraint between us. For a long time, we said nothing, lost in the shared stillness, the quiet music of falling rain, and the soft touch of bare skin. And in that moment, with the storm outside and the warmth between us, everything felt suspended, as if the world had narrowed down to just this: rain, silence, and her foot resting on me. The soft patter of rain outside set the evening's tone, calm, steady, unhurried. She entered the living room quietly, bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. There was a lightness to her step, as if she floated just above the ground. Without a word, she lowered herself onto the couch, sitting sideways with her legs stretched out in front of her. Her feet rested gently on my lap, warm and inviting. The familiar weight was both a comfort and a spark, grounding me in the moment while igniting a quiet fire beneath the surface. Her toes flexed slowly, curling and uncurling with a rhythm that felt like a secret dance, one I was only beginning to understand. I traced idle patterns on the tops of her feet, careful to keep my touch light, reverent. She leaned back, eyes half closed, a serene smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The space between us felt charged, not with urgency, but with quiet intimacy and trust. I could smell the faint scent of rain mixed with her skin, a combination that wrapped around me like a soft blanket. Every detail, the curve of her arch, the smoothness of her heels, the delicate freckles across her toes, felt magnified in the dim light. We sat like that for a long while, connected by the simple act of proximity and touch, the silence filled with things neither of us dared say aloud. And in that silence, the world outside, the rain, the noise, the chaos, slipped away until there was only this, her bare feet in my lap and the slow, steady beat of my own heart. The apartment felt cocooned in a soft, almost sacred stillness. She moved closer, her bare foot sliding from my lap to rest lightly against my chest. The touch was gentle, but carried a weight that anchored me in a way I hadn't expected. I looked up, meeting her calm gaze as if this small act spoke for everything we'd yet to say. Her toes flexed softly, tracing subtle patterns that sent a ripple of warmth through me. The smooth skin of her soul pressed against my shirt, a quiet assertion of presence and trust. There was an unspoken command in that foot, not demanding, but inviting me to surrender to the moment, to the connection unfolding between us. I could feel my breath hitch, pulse quicken, as the tension melted into something deeper. She smiled, a quiet curve of lips that held reassurance and promise. The slow, deliberate movement of her foot spoke of confidence, a silent guide through this new terrain we navigated together. I reached up hesitantly, fingers brushing the arch of her foot, feeling the warmth and softness beneath my touch. Her skin was alive, responding subtly, a delicate dance of sensation and restraint. The rain outside continued its steady rhythm, but inside, time seemed to slow. The foot on my chest was more than a touch. It was a connection, a tether between two worlds finding harmony. For a moment, the only sounds were the beating of my heart and the quiet, steady presence of her bare foot against me. A reminder that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest weight. Her foot rested lightly on my chest, and I felt the pulse of something unspoken between us, a fragile thread woven through every shared glance, every silent breath. The warmth beneath my fingertips was grounding, a reminder that this was real, that the space between us had changed forever. Slowly, she shifted, leaning closer until the soft curve of her ankle brushed against my neck. The scent of her skin, faint, comforting, wrapped around me like a whispered promise. My breath caught, unsteady yet eager. Our eyes met, a quiet understanding passing between us. No words were needed. The intimacy in that gaze said everything: trust, desire, vulnerability. It was as if time had folded in on itself, leaving only the two of us suspended in a moment that was at once tender and electric. Her toes flexed gently, tracing a slow rhythm across my collarbone, sending tiny shivers down my spine. I responded instinctively, reaching up to cup her foot, fingers trembling as I explored the delicate lines of her sole. She smiled softly, a smile that held both reassurance and invitation. The room felt charged, alive with a tension that was equal parts restraint and longing. In that closeness, I felt everything: the weight of past wounds, the thrill of new connection, the promise of what might come. It was overwhelming and beautiful, a slow dance that neither of us wanted to end. As we lingered there, wrapped in the quiet warmth of shared presence, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The air between us was thick with something unspoken, a tension that vibrated in every breath and whispered in every glance. Her bare foot still rested in my hands, warm and alive, a silent invitation I couldn't resist. I leaned in closer, drawn by the soft scent of her skin, subtle, comforting, and utterly intoxicating. It wrapped around me like a gentle fog, filling my senses and blurring the edges of the room. My breath slowed as I took in every detail: the delicate curve of her arch, the smoothness of her heel, the faint trace of red polish on her toes catching the light. Each element was a secret I was desperate to memorize, to hold close. She watched me with a calm intensity, eyes deep and knowing, as if she could see the storm of emotions swirling beneath my quiet exterior. There was a tenderness there, an unspoken reassurance that grounded me even as desire flickered and grew. I pressed a soft kiss to the top of her foot, careful and reverent, feeling the warmth of her skin beneath my lips. Her toes flexed gently, a small shiver passing through her that sent a ripple of electricity up my arm. The silence that followed was charged, a shared breath held between us, heavy with possibility and promise. It wasn't just about touch. It was about connection, about a quiet surrender that transcended words. In that moment, with her foot cradled in my hands and her scent mingling with the cool air, I felt something shift deep inside me. I breathed her in, letting the sensation wash over me, knowing that this was only the beginning. Her voice was low, teasing, a soft question that hung between us like a spark in the quiet room. She looked at me with eyes that held both challenge and warmth, toes curling lightly, as if daring me to admit the truth I'd been hiding. I swallowed hard, heart pounding beneath the weight of her gaze. The simple touch of her foot in my hands had stirred something deep, something I couldn't quite put into words. Yet in that moment, it felt impossible to deny. She smiled, that slow, knowing smile that made my breath hitch. "You like this, don't you?" I hesitated, then nodded, unable to find my voice but speaking volumes with the way my fingers tightened gently around her arch. The room seemed to close in, every sound muted except the quiet thrum of our shared heartbeat. The scent of her skin, the warmth of her soul. It was intoxicating, a magnetic pull I'd never experienced before. She shifted slightly, letting her toes brush lightly against my wrist, a teasing caress that sent shivers racing through me. Her gaze never wavered, steady and sure, as if she knew exactly the effect she had. "Good," she whispered, voice soft but certain. "Because I'm not done with you yet." There was a promise there, unspoken but clear. The dance we'd begun was far from over. It was just beginning, unfolding in slow, deliberate movements. And I was ready. The moment had arrived. Quiet, unassuming, yet utterly profound. She rested her foot on my face, the weight light but certain, like it had always belonged there. Not an intrusion, not a challenge, but a silent declaration of trust and belonging. I felt the warmth of her skin, the gentle curve of her arch, the subtle pressure of her heel against my cheek. It was more than a touch. It was a connection that bridged everything unsaid between us. Her eyes met mine, steady and calm, holding a softness that spoke of acceptance and something deeper, a surrender that wasn't forced but freely given. I didn't move. I couldn't have, even if I wanted to. The world shrank until it was just us, the quiet breathing and the intimacy of that simple, perfect placement. Something stirred in me, a mixture of awe, reverence, and a quiet joy that went beyond words. The silence between us grew thicker, a cocoon where nothing else existed but this moment. She smiled faintly, her toes flexing lightly, and I caught my breath. It was a dance of closeness, a slow embrace of something new and profound. In that stillness, I understood. This was not just a foot resting on a face. It was a bond, a promise, a home. And I was exactly where I was meant to be.